We are so excited to welcome Valarie Kaur to be a part of our summer series this week. The Sikh Coalition Summer Series is a week-long virtual event bringing community members together to learn from one another, discuss important issues, and engage in fun activities for all ages. We have had so many sessions this week and over 35 sessions planned for the entire week for the Sangat. And we have just one day left, so we hope that you continue to join us for the rest of today and throughout tomorrow as well. We are so thankful to be welcoming Valarie here today to be running this talk. She is titled See No Stranger, Becoming Warrior Sages in a Time of Turmoil. Valarie Kaur is an incredible civil rights activist, lawyer, filmmaker, innovator, and founder of the Revolutionary Love Project. Valarie burst into American consciousness in the wake of the 2016 election when her Watch Night service address went viral with 30 million views worldwide. And her question is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? Reframed the political moment and has become a mantra for people fighting for change. Valarie has won national acclaim for her story-based advocacy, helping to win policy change on issues ranging from hate crimes to digital freedom. A daughter of Sikh farmers in California, she has earned degrees at Stanford, Harvard Divinity School, Yale Law School, and holds an honorary doctorate. We're really excited to be welcoming Valarie today because her new book, See No Stranger, a memoir, and Manifesto of Revolutionary Love expands on her blockbuster TED Talk and is now available at seenostranger.com wherever you can buy books. If you'd like to follow Valarie Kaur's work, you can check her out on social media at Valarie Kaur. Valarie, we're so excited about this. We've heard amazing things about the book, and I personally cannot wait to read it. Yeah, so with that, I welcome you to get started, and thank you again.
Thank you, Harleen. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Oh, sister, I cannot wait to put this book in your hands. I feel like I wrote it for you, and I wrote it for all of the Sikh youth who are rising up right now and following our Guru's call to live lives as Sant Sipahi, as warrior sages. So in this hour together, I wanted to talk a little bit about this extraordinary moment that we find ourselves in, what it means to live as our Guru's Sikhs, to walk the path of what I call revolutionary love. I'll be offering some readings from See No Stranger. And then I really want to open up space to hear your questions and engage in conversation as much as we can. So that'll take us over the next 55 minutes. Are you ready? I want to begin by saying that if there is such a thing as ancestral trauma, which scientists are now telling us we carry the trauma of our ancestors, intergenerational trauma, then I believe there is also such a thing as ancestral resilience, that we carry in our blood, in our body, the resilience of our ancestors. And when I think about us as Sikhs, and I think about what our Gurus survived and our ancestors survived, from the Mughal Empire to the British Empire to partition to the pogroms against Sikhs in 1984. Think about hundreds of years of what we have survived and how that trauma, in the face of violence, it lives inside of us. And yet our Gurus also gave us the call to stare in the face of that much violence and that much fire and that much hate and become warrior sages, sage warriors, Sant Sipahi, to face the fires of this life with a kind of bravery that can change the world. And I hold fast to that now, because if we look around at what is happening in our lifetime, in our generation, in the world today, in our country today, more than 140,000 people have been killed by a virus that is disproportionately killing Black and brown people. We know that in the wake of seeing George Floyd gasp for breath in that video in a very public lynching. That's what it was. Not for 1 minute, not 3 minutes, not 8 minutes. We know that he is not the only one, that he is one of countless Black people, brown people who have been killed at the hands of the state. And we know that the kind of racist graffiti we saw on the walls of that restaurant in Santa Fe at the hands of white supremacists just some weeks ago, that is a continuation of a kind of hate violence that we as Sikhs have experienced since 9/11 and certainly long before. All of this is happening at a time when the 2020 election looms on the horizon, when so many of us have lost our economic security. We don't know what the future holds. And so if we are awake to what is happening right now, it is okay to feel breathless. It is okay to feel overwhelmed. It is okay to feel grief coursing through our bodies. It is okay even to feel hopeless. A few years ago, when I asked the question, when this president took power, is this darkness in our nation the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? It is a question I have been asking myself every single day. I ask myself this question today. When we see all of the deaths from the virus, when we see George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Nina Pop, Tony McDade, people that we will not get back, when we fear how many of our own people will be killed at the hands of white supremacists, it feels as though it is the darkness of the tomb, as if death has won. And yet, in this moment, I am seeing what I never thought I would ever see in my lifetime. Millions of people since George Floyd's murder, millions of people risking their own lives during this pandemic to flood the streets in their grief, in their rage, seeing George Floyd as their brother, not as criminal, not as other, but as their brother, Breonna Taylor as their sister, calling for racial justice, a global uprising for Black lives that we have never seen on the face of this planet. A reckoning around racial justice that is touching all 50 states and all corners of our public life, from NASCAR to the NFL to our workplaces and industries. There's not one institution of power in this country that is not being challenged right now, perhaps even dismantled right now, reimagined right now. And to see so many of us, to see so many Sikh youth in particular, youth like Mokam Singh, whose mother is on this webinar right now, putting their lives on the line, their bodies on the line, marching in the streets with signs saying Sikhs for Black lives, offering their voices and their art and their pens and their passion to say, no, our Black sisters and brothers and siblings, they are part of us, and what it means to fight for liberation, what it means to be Sant Sipahi, warrior sages for a new time, is to fight for them the way that our gurus taught us to fight for those who are in need. That is so inspiring to me. I am so inspired and emboldened by this rising generation. And so I see the darkness of the womb. I see a new nation, a new America that is longing to be born. A nation that is truly multiracial, multi-faith, multi-gendered, multicultural, where power is shared, where we strive to protect the dignity and the wellness of every single one of us, where we see no stranger. I believe that what happens now in the coming years, in this time of great transition, depends on what we do now and how we as Sikhs show up now. You see, in 25 years, within 25 years, the number of people of color in America will exceed the number of white people for the first time since colonization, and we are at a crossroads. Will we birth a nation that has truly never been on the face of this planet, a nation made up of other nations? a nation where no person is disposable? Or will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war, a power struggle with those who want to return America to a past where only a certain class of white people hold economic, political, and cultural power? When we think of climate change, we know that time is running out. And so literally what we do, what our generation does to stand up for dignity and for justice in a time like this will determine not just the future of our country, but the future of the human race. And this is where I believe that Sikhs have an essential role to play in this time in history, in the history of humanity. You see, we as Sikhs, we were given teachings that show us how to respond to a moment like this. When our gurus taught us to be Sant Sipahi, sage warriors, the warrior fights, the sage loves. I see it as a path of revolutionary love. And this book, See No Stranger, is my offering to this moment. It's my offering to all Sikhs who are willing and ready to reclaim, maybe perhaps you're already doing that work, reclaiming our Guru's teachings to help us fight for social justice, for a new time, for this time. I wrote this book shortly after I asked that question, is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? And Harleen said that the video of that speech went viral, and it was shortly after the inauguration of this president, and I was overwhelmed with people asking me, okay, but how do we push? How do we breathe? How do we labor for justice when the labor feels endless? And I knew how, because I knew how inside, like Sikhi had taught us how, but I didn't know how to put it into words. And so I was given a gift that very few women who are mothers and activists are ever given. Very few Sikh women are given. I was given time off, and I had a loving husband, loving parents, and they helped us move our family to the rainforest in Costa Rica. We spent about a year living in the rainforest, and in the mornings I would hike through the forest with my son Kavi on our backs, and in the afternoons I would sit at my desk and I would watch the mist float through the green valley. And it was like the first deep breath I had taken, because I have been a civil rights activist since September 11th. I was part of a generation of us, a generation of Sikhs who were called to stand up for our community in the wake of all the hate violence that followed 9/11, and in the wake of Balbir Uncle's murder. Balbir Singh Sodhi, the first person killed in a hate crime after 9/11. He was a family friend, so I called him Uncle. And ever since his murder, I never chose to be an activist. I did it as almost as a matter of life and death. Like, we had to figure out how to keep our community safe, our aunties and uncles safe. And so from 9/11 all the way to present day, almost 20 years, I've been a civil rights activist. I think of it as having a toolkit where I'm a filmmaker, I'm a lawyer, I'm an organizer, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and all of these tools are just different ways to tell our stories, to try to create social change and policy change. And so at this point, I had been pushing all my entire adult life. And when I went to the rainforest and had a moment of stillness, it was like putting breath in my body. It was like the first deep breath I had taken. And I was finally given time, you know, and I just want to say, like, I could only do this because of the love of my family. Like, my father and my husband pulled a writing desk up the mountain so that I could sit and read. My mother unpacked 100 journals that I had kept since I was a little girl, since I was the age of 7. She cooked for us. So we would have prontas in the morning and dal and chol at night and different subjis. And I was given the nutrition and the nutrients and the nourishment that I needed from my parents, from my husband, even from my son, and permission to actually spend time alone at my desk just to think. And I poured through the stories of my life, and I poured through Sikh history and the teachings of our gurus. And I poured through the stories of social movements in the past. And I poured through the science of human behavior. I gave myself a crash course in neuroscience. I wanted to understand how do we labor for justice? How? And I began to see patterns and practices that I came to call revolutionary love. And I began writing this book. So this book is, it's called a Memoir and Manifesto of Revolutionary Love. It's a tapestry of stories from my life, from the life of the Sikh community. But it is also offering a framework, a set of core practices for how to labor for justice. And it is infused with Sikh wisdom. It's almost like, you know, my attempt, my offering of taking Sikhi the way that Papaji, my grandfather, taught me, and offering it for a new time, a new generation. So any of you who are feeling breathless or tired, or if you want a companion for how to show up, I really want to put this book in your hands. And I want to read from this book because I think that it will help you. If I just tell you about what it means to be a warrior sage, that's one thing. But if I show you through the stories the way that I experience them, that's another. So I'm going to read for a few moments and then we'll talk together. Chapter 1 is called Wonder. My earliest memories were of my Nanaji, my mother's father. He would tuck me into bed at night, and with his hand on my forehead, stroking my hair, he recited his favorite shabad, Tati Vauna Lagi. The hot winds cannot touch you. There was a tremor in Papaji's voice, just as there was a tremor in his hand, and the tremor rose and fell in an arc that rocked me to sleep as he hummed the shabad. Papaji was always humming, while surveying the tomatoes in his garden, arms clasped behind his back like the army captain he had once been, while sitting at the kitchen table, cutting ice cream into slices like a cake, while tying his bug in the morning, slowly and carefully as if each layer contained secret histories, he was always humming. The sacred music resounded within him, spilling out when he parted his lips. Papaji had worlds of stories in him, ancient stories he would bequeath to me in slivers, stories of gurus and saints, warriors and poets, soldiers and farmers, and these stories formed a long, shimmering history that spanned centuries from India to America and ended with me. So you see, I grew up as a little girl on California's farmlands in Clovis. Among the peaches and plums and orchards, I felt so deeply connected to this land, to this soil. And I also felt connected to Sikhi because of the stories that Papaji would tell me. And my favorite was always the origin story. You all know this story, the story of Nanak. 5 centuries ago, the story goes, he was deeply troubled by the violence around him, Hindus and Muslims in turmoil. One day he disappeared on the bank of a river for 3 days. People thought he was dead, drowned. But Nanak emerged on the 3rd day with a vision of oneness. Ik Omkar, the oneness of humanity and of the world. This vision threw him into a state of ecstatic wonder, vismad, and he began singing songs of devotion called shabads, praising the divine within him and all around him. In other words, he was in love. Love made him see with new eyes. Everyone around him was a part of him he did not yet know. So this is how I interpret Guru Nanak's calling when he says, Nako beri nahi begana. Nako beri nahi begana. I see no enemy. I see no stranger. He was calling us to look upon the face of anyone around us and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. Guru Nanak taught that all of us could see the world in this way. There's a voice inside of each of us called Home, the I that names itself as separate from you. It resides in the bowl that holds our individual consciousness, but separateness is an illusion. When we quiet the chatter in our heads through music or meditation or recitation or song, kirtan, the boundaries begin to disappear. The bowl breaks. For a moment, we taste the truth, sweet as nectar. We are part of one another. Joy rushes in. Long after the moment passes, we can choose to remember the truth that we belong to each other. We can choose to see no stranger. So when Papaji was humming the shabads day and night, he was not praying as much as practicing a constant communion with all things. It was his way of remembering the truth, practicing, living inside of this mad. Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Papaji would say. It was our word for God, but he would say it throughout the day like it was a deep breath. Don't your nannies and nanas, dadis and dadas, don't they just say Vaheguru like it's a deep breath? Vahe is an expression of awe, and Guru is the light that dispels darkness. So even God's name was an expression of wonder at the divine around us and within us. But love, Papaji used to say this, love is dangerous business. In America, we say, I love you, I love you, I love you. All talk, no action. That's what he would say. You see, because if I see you as a part of me, then I must be willing to let your grief into my heart. And I must be willing to fight for you when you are in harm's way. And so Guru Nanak Sikhs, we became Sant Sipahi. Guru Nanak called for a revolution of the heart. Sikhs became, his followers were called Sikhs, students of truth, and Sikhs became known as warriors, sworn to defend all people in harm's way. Papaji told me stories of ancestors who rode into battle with sword in hand to defend vulnerable communities of all kinds and gave their lives to challenge the oppression of empire. Guru Arjan was martyred in a cauldron of burning sand. Guru Tegh Bahadur beheaded. Baba Deep Singh went on fighting with his head in his hand. The Sikh ideal, the Sant Sipahi, the sage warrior. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It was a path of revolutionary love. Papaji was my warrior sage. He went into the fires of this world with the eyes of a sage and the heart of a warrior, and he was teaching me how to reclaim that tradition here and now. Do not abandon your post, Papaji said, whenever I came to him in tears. You know, I would hear racial slurs on the schoolyard. I was called a black dog during recess, and I remember coming home and Papaji would say, do not abandon your post. I was a little girl in 2 long braids who liked to write poetry and ride on tractors, but my grandfather saw me as a warrior. And so I always nodded yes. I didn't know what that meant, not to abandon your post, until September 11th, until the wake of the horror of those events, when so many of our people, so many Sikhs, so many of our aunties and uncles, so many of our mothers and fathers, so many of our children became targets of hate in this country. My family has lived in America for a century. So my grandfather, he arrived, my Dadaji, he arrived in 1913. He survived the 1918 Spanish flu. He survived decades of racist laws. I remember there were waves of hate violence against our family after the Oklahoma City bombing, after the first Gulf War, after the Iran hostage crisis. But 9/11, that shifted us into a new paradigm entirely. Even today, almost 20 years after 9/11, we as Sikhs and our Muslim brothers and sisters, we are 5 times more likely to be victims of hate than we were before 9/11. So suddenly we are in this country under siege. And I tell the story about becoming an activist after Babir Uncle's murder and finding ways to tell his story. And I'm being so inspired by other Sikhs who are rising up to create new institutions where we had none, including the Sikh Coalition. I remember almost 20 years ago sitting in an office of some kind of business office in Manhattan when Sikh lawyers were sitting around in a circle talking about all of their phones ringing off the hook. Amar Bala, I remember, was there. And they were telling me that their phones were ringing day and night and there was no organization, there was no place for people to go to find help. And so this coalition of Sikh lawyers started to organize together, started to represent our community, started to become the Sikh coalition. It was out of need. It was out of this willingness to become warriors in a time when our community most needed us. And so think about it, all those years since, almost 20 years later, the Sikh Coalition has become the most formidable civil rights organization for our community. Look how far we've come, and yet how much we still have to battle. Which takes me, I'm skipping ahead now, which takes me to Oak Creek, the white supremacist who walked into a Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin in 2012, killed 6 people, and now 7, and I'll tell you why. In a few days, we'll be honoring the 8-year anniversary of the massacre at of Oak Creek. And I want to tell you why I believe that moment was another watershed moment for our community. So 9/11 was one, and then Oak Creek, and this is why. So now I'm reading from the 7th chapter in the book. I had always called the victims of hate crimes just that, victims. We as Sikhs were invisible victims, and so I thought that our role as advocates was to call the nation's attention to our suffering, to jump up and down and wave our hands in the air and ask America to see us. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, Muslim, Arab, and South Asian American advocates, MASA advocates, jumped into action to respond to the onslaught of discriminatory policies by the state and hate crimes in the street. But the threats never ceased, so we became masters of crisis management. We built infrastructure for crisis management. We got funded for crisis management. Crisis management protects victims from immediate harm. It does not easily make space for those victims to be seen as survivors who have something to teach the rest of the nation. You see, all this time, because we were made to manage crisis, our goal was just to tell our stories as Sikhs and the fact of who we were and the fact that we were victims of violence. But what we saw in Oak Creek, it all changed for me. I learned in Oak Creek that Sikhs had something to teach America about how to respond to the violence of white nationalism socially, politically, and spiritually. In Oak Creek, I saw the practices of revolutionary love at work. We wondered, we grieved, we fought, we raged, we listened, we reimagined the future. And the Sikh Coalition played a vital role in that fight. For all the people who came together to grieve in the wake of that massacre, the Sikh Coalition really led us to harness that energy into organizing and to call to change federal hate crimes policy. So today, the US government is finally tracking hate crimes against our community and other minority communities because of the ways that we organized in the wake of Oak Creek. In Oak Creek, I saw how the families who survived that massacre were Sansapai for a new time. So many of the children of Oak Creek, from Pardeep and Arno to Mandeep and Rahul, I saw so many of them, even in the wake of their parents and their aunts and uncles being killed, rise up to organize in the name of Chardikala. And there was that word again. The Gurus taught us to become Sansapai, to fight for justice, to labor for justice in the spirit of Chardikala. You know, I had always translated Chardikala as eternal hope or eternal optimism. And I don't think that is the strongest translation into English. And this is why, this is how I learned that. Remember I talked about 6 people were killed, but there was a 7th? Baba Punjab Singh was a great orator. He was someone who looked like my grandfather. He was a man of many words, many stories, and he would travel to different gurdwaras. And he was at Oak Creek during the time of the shooting, and he was hit by bullets, but he wasn't killed. He was rendered paralyzed. And so he lay on a bed outside of Oak Creek, a hospital bed, day after day, month after month, year after year, unable to move, unable to speak, except for blinking his eyes, twice for no, twice for yes, once for no. And every time I would go and visit Papa, I'd call him Papaji. Every time I would visit Baba Punjab Singh, it was the same. I would walk into the room to the sound of prayers. I would help Virji, his son, Ragvinder Virji, and his daughter, Amrit, wash his hair and make one long braid. I would rub oil into his skin and massage his legs. I would take his hand in mine. His eyes would open. His eyes would always sparkle. Papaji, do you recognize me? I would ask. He could only blink, remember? He blinked twice, yes. Papaji, we are all praying for you. Do you feel our prayers and our love? I asked. He blinked twice. Virji asked his father, Papaji, are you in Chardikala? He was asking this grandfather, who could not move or could not speak, are you in Chardikala? And Babaji, he would blink his eyes twice. Yes. Yes, I am in Chardikala. What does Chardikala really mean? What did I take it to mean? Chardikala is woven into our Sikh scriptures and our vernacular, translated often as relentless optimism. But what I witnessed in Oak Creek and what I was learning from this family, Baba Punjab Singh's family, was different from optimism. This was not about the future at all. This was about a state of being in the present moment, as if now is all there is. Now and now and now. This is a state of joyfulness inside the struggle, an energy that keeps us in motion, a breathing that keeps us laboring even inside the pain of labor. Hope is a feeling that waxes and wanes, sometimes brilliant and luminous, sometimes a faint sliver in the sky, sometimes gone completely. No matter how hopeful or hopeless we feel, we can choose to return to the labor anyway. Sometimes we live to receive the gift of our labor. Sometimes we do not. But it does not matter, because when we labor in love, when we labor in Chardikala, the labor is not only a means, but an end in itself. I believe that laboring in joy, I believe that laboring for justice in Chardikala is the meaning of life. Do you remember the story of my Pago? That's a story that Papaji used to tell me when I was little. Do you remember that story? There was a great, great battle, and 40 soldiers in the 17th century, 40 soldiers abandoned the fight and returned to the village. There it is. And this village woman named Mai Pago, she turned to them and said, "You will not abandon the fight. You will return to the fire, and I will lead you." She donned a turban, she mounted a horse, and with a sword in her hand and fire in her eyes, she led them where no one else would. She became the one she was waiting for. Ever since I heard that story, I had always wanted to be the warrior in the story. I had always wanted to be like Mai Pago. But here's the truth. I am the deserter too. There are times at night, even when I think of Baba Punjab Singh, there are times when I feel like giving up, when I feel hopeless. But I am the deserter and I am the warrior. I am the woman warrior. There is a woman warrior inside of me. We talked about that ancestral resilience. I believe there's a woman warrior. There's a warrior inside of each of us. There's a woman warrior inside of me who keeps taking my hand and leading me back into the fire anyway, again and again. Why does she keep leading me back? In the story, the 40 deserters who followed Mai Pago back into the field all died in that battle. They fought for a future they did not live to see. They did not know that they would be remembered or that their fight would make a difference. They did not know that our people would go on to live in every part of the world and recite their names in every ardas, the prayer at the end of every Sikh service. Today we call these 40 warriors, you know the 40 warriors, the Chali Mukte, the 40 liberated ones. Not because they were liberated in death, but because they were liberated in life. You see, for the warrior sage, for the Sant Sipahi, the fight is not just a means to an end. The fight, seva, fighting for justice, is a way of being in the world. It is an ongoing labor of love. The woman warrior in me keeps leading me back into the field because it is the only way to keep loving the world and myself here and now. That would have to be enough. Baba Punjab Singh died shortly before the pandemic began in March, really hit this country in March. And, you know, August 5th, the anniversary of Oak Creek is just a few days away. And every year I would go, almost every year, I would go and visit Baba Punjab Singh. And so I will not be traveling there this year. We will not be able to make the pilgrimage to the Oak Creek Gurdwara this year. And Baba Punjab Singh is gone. And yet, like the Chali Mukte, he taught us how to be liberated in life. He taught us a kind of courage that transcends even death. He taught us what it meant to live in Chardikala, live in joyfulness, even when it gets that dark, even when it is that painful, even when we want to give up. To continue to show up to life that way. I believe that's our inheritance as Sikhs. That is what we have the ability to teach the country. We have the ability to show America that we are not just victims. We are agents of revolutionary love. We are our Guru's Sikhs. We are a Sant Sipahi. And all of us have swords and shields. No matter who we are, we have a kirpan, we have a tal. What is your kirpan? Is it your voice? Is it your pen? Is it your pocketbook? Is it your doctor's scalpel? Is it your artist's brush? Is it your ability to code? All of us. Is it your tabla, Mokam Singh? All of us have the ability to use our instruments in life as our kirpans to fight the good fight, to fight for people who are most in harm's way. And what is your tal? What is your shield? What is the thing that will protect you? Is it your law degree? Is it your camera? Is it your allies? Is it your accomplices? What is it is it your sangat? What will protect you? I think that's all we need, each of us, to find our kirpan, to find our tal. And there's a story that Guru Gobind Singh Ji designed the dilruba, the ancient Sikh instrument. I have mine in the corner there. He designed the dilruba to be small enough for his Sikhs to wear on their backs when they went into battle. He called for Sikhs to play kirtan, to do the shabads in the morning, to ground themselves before they walked into the fire of battle. So what is your dilruba? It could be an actual dilruba like mine, or it could be meditation, it could be singing kirtan, it could be reciting kirtan, it could be yoga, it could be walking, it could be breathing, it could be whatever it is. Like, do you have your kirpan? Do you have your tal? Do you have your dilruba? And finally, do you have your sangat? We don't go to battle alone. We don't give birth alone. In order to show up with that much bravery in this life, we need each other. We need our sangat. And that is why I'm so grateful to the Sikh Coalition for creating this summer series, for bringing us together virtually in a time when we can't be together personally. No matter what, there are ways for each of us to have these 4 things in our lives. And that's all you need to be Sant Sipahi: your kirpan, your tal, your dilruba, and your sangat. And once you have those things, once you found your things, then you are ready to walk the Guru's path. Guru Nanak said, if you wish to play the game of love with me, step forth with your head on your palm. What will you risk? What will you do that you haven't done before? In this time, when Black people, especially in our country and in our lives, need us to be Sikhs of our Gurus, need us to stand up and fight oppression. What will we do for the Black people in our lives? Every society is ordered by a hierarchy of human value. In India, it is the caste system, a caste system that our Gurus sought to abolish, right? In this country, in America, the caste system, the oldest hierarchy of human value on this soil, has been anti-Black racism. The kind of hate violence that we experience as Sikhs, it is only possible because of a system of white supremacy that depends on the idea that Black lives are disposable. So you see, we need to fight for Black lives. We need to fight anti-Black racism. We need to center Black lives in our justice work, not just for their liberation, but for our liberation, for our collective liberation. We will not be free until Black people in our lives are free. And when we fight for them, we show the country that we are not victims of hate, that Sikhs are survivors and Sikhs are warriors. And this is what it means to be a Sikh, to fight for justice with all that we have, with our being, with our body, and with our breath. And I believe it is possible. Some of you may say, but oh, we as Sikhs have so much of our own struggles. I believe that love is not an exchange economy, and love is not finite. That we have the ability to love ourselves well and keep our aunties and uncles safe, and stand up for people who do not look like us, who need us, because that's what it means to be a Sikh. That's what I believe it means. That's what I want my children to know. Because here's the truth. Like Baba Punjab Singh, like the Chali Mukte, I may not live to see the fruits of all this labor. We may not live to see it. But if we can show our children how to walk the path that our Gurus laid out for us, isn't that how we change the world? Isn't that how we keep the light and power of Sikhi alive? If we can show them how to walk the path of love and justice in Chardi Kala. For we will be someone else's ancestors one day. We will be their ancestors one day. And if we get this right, they will inherit not just our fear or our trauma. They will inherit our bravery and our wisdom, the wisdom that our Gurus gave us. Thank you so much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for letting me share my heart with you. We have 15 minutes. I gave you more than I thought I was going to. I just wanted to give it all to you. So I'm sorry. We have 15 minutes and I'm so grateful. There's a group of young Sikhs on the call right now, and I'll be meeting with them afterwards. So if you are going to be meeting with me afterwards, save your questions for then. And if this is the only time we have, I am so eager to hear what you are thinking, what you are feeling. You can put it in the chat. You can put it in the Q&A. Gudin Viet has asked, how do you honor your grief and pay your respects to ancestors? You know, I feel Papaji with me all the time. My grandfather, my Nanaji. I feel Baba Punjab Singh too, but oh, Papaji, who gave me Sikhi in the first place when I was little. He died about a decade ago, and his prayer, his shabad, Tat Divana Lagi Pad Brahmchanai, Jogit Hamare Ram Ka Dukh Lage Na Pai. It is what rises to my lips every time I need to feel brave. I remember I tell the story in the book, being in the face of police brutality, when a police officer injured me behind bars. I was so scared and I was so alone. And I said Papaji's prayer and I felt him and I felt his strength inside of me so I could go on, so I could take the next breath. And it was that Shabad that my mother poured into my ear, Tati Vanolagi, when I was on the birthing table with my son and my daughter, helping me breathe, telling me the hot winds cannot touch me, my love, just take the next breath. And it's that prayer, that Shabad that I recite every time the news gets so overwhelming. You know, this week we lost another elder, Saab Masada, a great Japanese American elder in my hometown, who really showed me, taught me the stories of the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And he has died, and I miss him so much. And I think about how much we need ancestors like him and John Lewis to be living among us. And whenever I feel afraid, whenever I feel like the deserter in the story, I sing Papaji's prayer, and that helps me become the Mai Bago. It helps me become the woman warrior who leads me back to show up to the labor another day. So that's how I honor my ancestors. I keep them alive like that. And as we talk, I'm going to ask you all, you've heard me talk about Papaji. Who is the ancestor who makes you brave? If you can close your eyes just for a moment and take a breath with me, let it come, let it go. If you could imagine an ancestor standing behind you now, an ancestor who makes you brave. It could be one of our gurus. It could be someone in your ancestral line. It could be your dadi or your dada or your nani or your nana. Who is it? It could be your mother or father. Who is it that makes you brave? Whose love do you want to fill your heart right now? Whose strength do you need to face this unprecedented moment that we are in? And if you can quiet your mind for a moment, can you hear what that ancestor has to tell you? And if you hear something, I invite you to take your cupped hands and bring it to your lips and just speak it into your hands. I could hear Papaji saying to me, don't abandon your post, my dear. So I'm going to speak that into your hands. And if you don't hear anything, just a feeling, you can take a deep breath and breathe into your hands. And now you're taking that very precious wisdom, and I invite you to take it into your heart, press it into your heart, and take a deep breath with me. Let it come. Let it go. And let it run through your body, through your being, through your breath, through your blood. They are with us, aren't they? Papaji used to always say, if you summon me, I will come. It doesn't matter if that's out there or in here, does it? When we summon our ancestors, when I summon my Papaji, I can feel his bravery in my body and I can make it through another day. I'm going to read more. And if you'd like, you can put in the chat the ancestor who came to you. And if you want to say what they said to you, you can. It would be lovely to name and to witness. So mine, I would say my Papaji, and don't abandon your post. So if you'd like to do that, you can, and I can read them all. I'll keep going through the questions. I'll try to be shorter because we have about 8 minutes left. Avneet says, I find that while many of us do uphold these values of see no stranger and fighting oppression, there seems to be a lot of oppression within our Sanghas and communities against, for example, Black Sikhs and LGBTQI Sikhs. What are your thoughts on this? Yes! Yes! I mean, I have heard the most disgusting racial slurs in Punjabi against Black people at my own kitchen table, you know, with my own extended family as a kid. I mean, how much do we hear anti-Black racism in our Sanghas? How much do we hear kinds of slurs against queer people? I mean, this is, when I say we are called to be Sikhs, I don't mean just out there in the world. I mean inside of our own hearts, inside of our own families, inside of our own Sanghats and Gurdwaras. There are so many hierarchies of oppression that we have internalized and we have forgotten We have forgotten the radical teachings that Guru Nanak gave us that center love above all, above all. So Avneet, I encourage you, I know it's difficult to stand up inside of our own community, to break our silence around violence against women, around sexual incest, around sexual assault, around domestic violence, around anti-Black racism, around queer violence, all these things that we are still struggling with as a community. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I believe that we can do all this work at the same time. And I tell many of those stories in the book too, which was really hard for me, but I understood that our solution when it comes to problems inside of our own community, it's not silence, it's more solidarity. So my hope is that in telling these stories in this book, it encourages many, many more Sikh voices, Sikh women in particular, to tell their stories, to be great, brave, and how they interpret See No Stranger, how they interpret Guru Nanak's call to love without limit. It's ongoing labor, isn't it? It's ongoing. Harjot says, my favorite Shabad is also Tat Deevana Lagi. You talked about that moment of stillness you felt on that trip after years of being a lawyer and activist. How do you battle the overwhelming feeling of burnout, a feeling like you are carrying the weight of the world's emotions? Oh, I know. I think my mother's watching right now. She's like, yes, that is Valarie's daily battle. Currently working as a lawyer for folks with severe mental health issues, at the end of my work days, I feel too burnt out to do the other work that matters. Oh, my sister. Oh, Harjot. I believe that you are a sister. You may be a brother, you may be a sibling, but I just want to say to you that I define revolutionary love as the choice to love others, our opponents, and ourselves. That we will not last if we don't learn to love our flesh. And that means, I mean, I literally have a gigantic bright pink water bottle next to me because I forget to drink water. That means drinking water. It means eating nourishing food. It means sleeping enough at night. And I know it's hard to love yourself when the people you are working with seem to be going through so much worse. But this is what I want to tell you. This is from the book. I had been made to believe that overwork was the only way to make a difference. I had come to measure my sense of worth by how much I produced or how well I responded and how quickly. Do you feel that way, Harjot? I had worked for so long and so hard and at such great speeds that I had become accustomed to breathlessness. I could not remember the last time I had a long night of rest. When is the last time you, Harjot, were able to gaze at the night sky? When was the last time you danced? I told myself that it was for good reason, that the need was too great, that I was too important, that our work was too important. Doesn't that sound like homemade? Doesn't that sound like the ego? Perhaps you too have felt this way. This is what I wish to tell you, Harjot. You don't have to make yourself suffer in order to serve. You don't have to grind your bones into the ground. You don't have to cut your life up into pieces and give yourself away until there is nothing left. You belong to a community and a broader movement. Your life has value. You have value. We need you alive. Harjot, we need you alive. We need you to last. And you will not last if you are not breathing. I know that I said that I got to leave the country for a year and take that kind of long, deep breath. Very few people are able to get that in their lives. And now I'm back. I'm back in the country. I'm back in LA. We're on the verge of another shutdown. I have 2 small babies. I'm trying to show up to the movement for racial justice. It is so overwhelming. And so I've had to figure out, how do I breathe throughout my day? The midwife on the birthing table, she doesn't say breathe once and push the rest of the way. She says breathe and push, and then breathe again. There's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm to it. So, Harjot, how can you breathe when you come home at night? How can you breathe in the mornings? How can you breathe all throughout when you're meeting your clients? Sometimes it's as simple as washing your hands in cold water, or calling a friend, or dropping into meditation, or doing Nam Simran, whatever it is to weave breathing throughout your day, and then breathing throughout your week. Are you taking weekends, my love? breathing throughout the month, throughout the year? Are you taking a month out of the year to rest and to recover? I think the only way that we can stay laboring, not just for a few more years, but over the course of a lifetime. Think of Grace Lee Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs, the civil rights activist who labored until she was in her 90s. How can we last? I want to grow old with you. I want to be old, an old woman one day. And I want to be able to look back at my life and know that I labored with joy. Because this is what Parker Palmer taught me, the great Quaker theologian. He said, don't measure your life based on outcomes. Measure your life based on your faithfulness to the labor. How faithful can you be to the labor, loving others and loving yourself so that you last? And that's what Sikhi teaches us, doesn't it? That Sikhi is not a belief to be held. It is a way, it is an orientation to life that is both personal and political. It is a way of moving through the world. It is a way of laboring for justice in a way that can go on through all of the days of your life. Seva is supposed to be a way of life. So breathe throughout, my love. Breathe throughout so that you can last. I want us to last together. I'm going to look at, I have one more minute. I'm going to see if there's anything else in the chat. Oh, Ellen is recalling her ancestor, her father, who is telling her, I am with you. And the final question from Pranati is, how did you keep connected with Sikhi while working on your career? Oh, Pranati, they're not separate from me. And I don't think they should ever be separate for anyone. When you are living into Sikhi, what is it calling you to do? And not all of us can be full-time activists, but that doesn't mean that we don't need you wherever you are. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a teacher, if you are an entrepreneur, whatever you are, if you're an artist, wherever you are, whoever you are, you have a way to follow the path of Sikhi. What is your kirpan? What is your tal? What is your dilraba? Who is your sangat? How can you use those tools as a doctor, as a lawyer, as an educator, as an artist, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a daughter? I believe all of us have the ability to become my Pagos for this time. We just need to find our role and become brave enough and make sure we have our Sangat by our side. Which brings me back to the Sikh Coalition. Thank you so much to the Sikh Coalition, to Harleen, for allowing us to create a sense of Sangat now today. Thank you, everybody.
Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. Thank you so much, Valarie. This was really, really beautiful. And I feel like I can speak for many who were here when we say that we're holding our breath in so many moments that you were reading to us. Thank you for sharing your love and your work with us through all of this. And thank you for being so personal in your responses to all of these comments. I am also keeping a look at our Facebook stream. There are definitely some really lovely comments here as well. And I hope that you get a chance to read those later. I'll make sure that I send you the link there.
I will. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you know, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining. And Valarie, one thing that really resonated with me was when you said that you believe that laboring for love and for justice in Jardika is the meaning of life. And thank you so much for encouraging us to find those tools within Sikhi to, you know, do that work and to do that labor. So thank you so much for everything, and we are truly, truly thankful that you joined us today.
Thank you, my sister.
Of course. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us. We do have another day and a half left of summer series sessions. We really hope that you're able to join us. You can register for sessions at sikhcoalition.org/summer series. And with that, thank you so much. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.